Hello, this card features another in my watercolor Easter card series that I've done. This one is also using the Distress Stains ink, which helps me make this sky background, which is very pretty. I'm also using the Stampin' Up! Lovely as a Tree stamp set. This panel is popped up on fun foam to give it a little bit of dimension. And the inside is very basic, and I've done it in several cards in this series. Let me go over the materials that I use for this card. I have a card base cut 8.5 by 5.5, scored at 4 1/4. I have the black mat cut 4 7/8 by 3 1/8. Watercolor paper. This is Bristol watercolor paper, but you can use any that you had. And a piece of fun foam. I'm using the black because it matches the mat. If you don't have fun foam, you can pop this panel up on foam tape. I'm also going to be using the Distress Stains. I'm using Wilted Violet, Twisted Citron, and Abandoned Coral. The Distress Stain has a dauber top, and I've really coming to really like these little things. I'm also going to be using a Marvy Plume 2 pen in rose ink, Versafine Onyx black, and a Spectrum Noir sparkle pen. If you don't have these distress stains, you can use any distress ink that you had, distress markers, or any watercolor paint. I'm also going to be doing some embossing, so I have my clear embossing powder and my embossing buddy. The stamp sets I'm using is the Stampin' Up! Lovely as a Tree. This is a very popular stamp set. And the Fiskars Laugh With Me quotes. It has a lot of interesting and useful quotes in it. I'm also going to be using some rhinestones, which I have on the stickers. I got this from a new stamping store supply that I visited, Urban Scrapbookers in Edmonds. And I also need the water and a watercolor brush. So let me clear this stuff up and get started. First, I need to bring in my Misty tool and prepare my paper. I'm going to be embossing, so I'm going to run my embossing buddy all over the paper to make sure that the powder doesn't stick where I don't want it to be. I'm going to be using the Versafine clear embossing over the ink trick, so I need to have my embossing powder ready to go as soon as I finish the stamping. I decided to double stamp this so it would give a much darker tree image. I thought that looked nicer. So now that I have stamped it, I'm just going to drop it into the embossing powder and take it over to my heat tool and heat it. And now to move on to the watercoloring. I'm taking my clear block and I'm going to use that as my palette for the watercoloring. I'm going to start off by doing the ground. So I'm putting the Twisted Citron on the block, and then I'm going to drop clear water across the bottom of the panel where I'm going to be doing the watercoloring. This helps the paper flow and doesn't grab it in a very sharp and dark way, which is not the look I want to go for. I have a paper towel to get the extra water so it doesn't get too messy. The trick is to put enough water that the paint flows, but not so much that the paint just goes completely out of control and flows where you don't want it to be. After I've got the good first base layer of color down, I'm wiping the brush dry and bringing a little bit more concentrated color and adding it toward the top of the leaves, which would be on the ground. And I dried that, and then I'm now moving on to bringing in the colors for the sunset. So I'm going to be using a combination of the Abandoned Coral and the Wilted Violet. So I'm putting both down on my block, and I'm speeding this part up because it's the same technique that I used before. I'm focusing the violet on the top, which is where it would be darker. And then I dried this panel. Because it's wilted, it will warp a little bit. I have to bend the paper upwards to make it lay a little bit flat. And now while that's completely drying, I'm going to move to the inside of the card. I just have a simple quote from Mother Teresa, "Peace begins with a smile," and a Easter wishes scallop circle. I kept the inside very similar to the other cards in this series and very simple. I'm giving it a shake to make sure it dries, and then I'm taking the rose pen and I'm coloring the outside of the scallop circle. And I've decided to put a little bit of sparkle on it too. And now I'm moving on to assemble the card pieces. I'm pressing it with my bone folder and get a good seam. And now I'm going to stamp the Happy Easter on the panel, which now that I know it's completely dry. I didn't want to take a chance and do it too soon because it may smear, because it's a very thick, solid image. And now I'm taking my ATG gun and I'm being very generous with the tape because watercolor panels will start to warp a little bit from the extra moisture. I'm putting it on the mat, and I don't have a large margin on it, but I have enough, I think. I put my fun foam on by pulling the paper partially back, laying it in place, and then after I have a good placement, finishing taking the paper off. Then I put ATG adhesive on the back of the fun foam, and I'm again being very generous. And I put the panel in place. You see me check to make sure that I have the card right side up so I don't put it up backwards, which I have frequently done, unfortunately. Once I have it straight where I want it, I give it a good press down. And now I'm taking the sequins, the rhinestones, sorry, and I'm adding a few to the upper corner of the card. I usually have a lot of trouble with sequins and rhinestones, but excuse me, this went pretty smoothly. Because I wanted them to match the background, I took the pen and I colored right over the sequins. You can do this with any marker that you have over clear sequins. I tend to get mostly clear because I can always color it to match what I'm doing versus trying to keep a whole bunch of different colors, which it takes up a lot of space. And now I'm taking my sparkle pen and I'm going to add sparkle across the sky. It makes it appear that there are twinkling stars in the background. It doesn't show up very well on camera, but in real life it's really sparkly. And that's the finished card. It was really quick video, very minimal supplies. This is a very versatile stamp set. I love it. I really recommend you try and get your hands on this Lovely as a Tree stamp set. It has a lot of applications in Christmas and springtime and fall. You can make some nice night skies. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to my channel. I try to put out new content pretty frequently, and I really appreciate all the positive comments and encouragement that I'm getting. Thank you and have a great day.